good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Richards, Technical Services Manager of the Managing General Agents Association, and I'd like to welcome you to our briefing this morning. This is being delivered by Bob James, Chief Operations Officer at Lloyd's, with a Blueprint 2 update. I'd just like to run through a few housekeeping points. Please ensure your microphone and camera are turned off. If you'd like to ask a question, for those online, feel free to use the chat button at the bottom of your screen. Time allowing, these will be asked and answered at the end of the event. This briefing is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be issued post-event together with the slides and our feedback survey. Please take the time to complete our survey, which will take no longer than 2 minutes. This allows us to deliver the best possible future events to our members. So without further ado, enjoy the briefing, everyone, and over to you, Bob.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I guess one other housekeeping rule for those who are here in the room: no physical violence towards me. If you hear something you don't like, which could very well happen. I'm Bob James. You can tell from my accent I'm not from the UK, although I live here and consider it home now, but I think the accent is the last thing to go. I have been with Lloyd's for, I can't believe it's been this long. Some days it feels like 25 years, but 2.5 years, I guess, at the end of this year. And I joined, ironically, I joined from an intermediary in the US where half of our business was cover holder business and half of it was warranty business. And I was responsible for the cover holder business. And little did I expect when I showed up here that half of what I'd be talking about would be cover holder business from a sort of a different perspective. My background is in London and in the US, and all on the property and casualty side, both broker and underwriter side. So I've seen it from both sides of the house. I was hired in June of 21 to lead the Blueprint 2 transformation. And again, I never thought I'd be in the COO role, and I'm not sure it was a good decision when I said yes to do it, because it's someone said to me that I must have had a bullseye tattooed on my back, because it's obvious when I go to meetings with this, you can never keep everybody happy, but very happy to be here. It's nice to talk to this audience because it kind of takes me home to my last job in the US. What I'd like to do is quickly get through the material. I'll try not to do it too quickly. If I am going too quick and there's something you want to ask, obviously you can ask it. Secondly, I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions, which was mentioned at the front end of the call. And then thirdly, I guess it's important just to set this up that what you're going to hear about today is largely related to open market business. And so if you're wondering, like, what is he ever going to get around to the DA side? What the hell's going on with that? If the Blueprint 2 in its initial focus is mostly around open market, and we'll kind of talk about why that is as we get into the Q&A, if that's helpful. And then last but not least, if anybody ever was involved in working with or for AIG when Hank Greenberg was the CEO, that's how old I am, I worked for him. And so all of my pain nerves have been burned down in my body. So there's nothing you can do other than maybe physical violence that would actually hurt me. And so I'd rather just have a very candid conversation, because half the time I go to these kind of sessions and I always walk out wondering, did the issues actually get on the table, or was there something else that should have been said that wasn't said? So you won't hurt my feelings in that regard. And also, I haven't completely drank the Lloyd's Kool-Aid yet. So as we were talking before the start of the meeting, I don't think Lloyd's is the center of the universe. I don't think that Lloyd's. I don't think Lloyd's is the London market, just part of the market. And I do find it to be kind of a Byzantine and odd place to work, because I spent all of my life working for commercially oriented enterprises where profit, earnings per share, EBIT, all those things were really important. And if you asked somebody at Lloyd's what EBIT is, they would probably think it's a stuffed animal that's offered up on holidays. So with that said, why don't we just get right into the material. So you can see the outline on the first page of what I'd like to talk about. I'm going to go through it, hopefully not too quickly, but if you, when you see the material, if there's a question you have, let me know. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about why are we doing this in the first place. Because I've fallen victim, as much as I said I would not fall victim to speaking in program speak, because I just live in it every single day. So I'm trying to lift up the conversation when I have an opportunity to have them talk about why. So if we just take a look at the next slide. If you look at the Lloyd's marketplace today, and you will know this, but I think this is true whether you're on the DA side or cover holder side or open market side. It is a very manual, error-prone set of processes that has just, and I'll just give you one statistic. And there's a lot of reasons for it, so I'm not blaming it on anybody, but on average, and this is an average, it takes us 260 days to close a claim on average. So that's generally not a good statistic if you're the end customer. And then if you look at the amount of time it takes for to actually issue a piece of business and be able to bill the customer and move the money, many times the underwriter's on risk and sometimes has an open claim and they haven't even collected any premium and the data hasn't actually flown through the system. And just to put it in perspective, we've got about 1,400 people, and that doesn't include all the people that work for you or all the people that work for the underwriters or the other brokers who are processing this business. So if you look at all the people in the food chain to actually get a piece of business processed so you can move money and settle claims, it's just really antiquated. So what we were trying to do is create a program, and I think unfortunately Lloyd's, because of who Lloyd's is, tended to trump up some of the language in colorful terms that don't actually mean anything. And so we talk about digitization and we talk about modernizing the market. We talk about a lot of things, but there's really just three fundamental things that we're trying to do. One is to get the market to agree on a common and used set of data standards. I know that sounds really mundane, but we spent quite a bit of time trying to get there for open market. We're not quite there yet for cover holder business. As we were talking before the meeting started, we've now turned the open market standards into accord standards, so they're industry-based standards. And the reason for that is the expression I use is when I first went to China for the very first time, which was about 10 years ago, I guess. I got quite worried I was going to get there and I was going to get arrested. I was going to get lost. Something bad was going to happen to me because I didn't speak Chinese. And as the plane started, I remember as the plane was landing in Beijing, I thought this is going to be terrible. And of course I get off and everybody speaks English in the airport as their second language. There's English signs everywhere. It's because it's become sort of the language of business. And so the data standard is really nothing more than that. The second thing we're trying to do is the way that this business gets processed in the London market joint venture, which as you can see from the top of the slide is now called Delegated. We rebranded that business, is on a 35-year-old mainframe-based green screen system. It is not very resilient. It is really old. It's very brittle. It's hard to change. And it's got big operational resiliency gaps. Nobody really cares about any of that until something goes wrong. The pressure that we get from regulators and other stakeholders around, will this platform survive a cyber attack? Is it resilient? All that kind of stuff is a big issue. And so it's sort of kind of underneath the covers, but part of this is to upgrade that system to a cloud-based environment, which we're in the middle of right now. In fact, DXC, who's the technology provider, there's about 600 people finishing that process. And then the third thing is which is probably the most difficult, and it'll take, I think, a few years to get there, is to get business open market first, submitted digitally instead of someone taking a Microsoft Word document, turning it into an MRC, insuring agreement, turning it into a PDF, and then emailing the PDF either through PPL or some other platform to the bureau so somebody can sit down in front of these green screens and type it all in. And if you boil down all the other stuff that we're doing, that's really all we're trying to do. And we think if we can actually get there, the more fundamental changes, once people have a complete set of data to place a piece of business and it's agreed across the marketplace and it can move digitally, that there'll be all sorts of innovation opportunities that we don't see today. So if you want the Bob James version of Blueprint 2, that's really what it is. We'll go on to the next slide just to give you a sense of how it is today. And I've said some of these things today, but I use 35 years as the existing age of the system. Some people say it's as much as 40 years. It doesn't really matter. I mean, if you think of a 35-year-old system in technology terms, it might be 500 years old because technology changes so fast. So there's that. The other thing is that we will get some new services out of this from a claims perspective that we don't have today. And I'll get to the DA piece in a minute. We've had a difficult time on the DA piece, partly because, and I don't know how else to say it because I'm American, so I'm not very nuanced. You know, depending on what number you want to believe, there's somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 cover holders that do business in the London market, not the Lloyd's market, and trying to get agreement on how to move forward in unison on things has been difficult. So some of the things that the LMA wanted to do or legal wanted to do around data standardization, elimination of border rows, all that kind of stuff, has been difficult for us to understand how we would actually build it and get it used, not just the build piece. So that is work that's left to be done. And then last but not least, we think that we got 1,400 people today in the marketplace. You could probably multiply that by a factor of 20 would be my guess, because 1,400 is just the joint venture in terms of the number of people in the marketplace. We think that if we get this stuff done digitally, it'll be a lot less people. So it should be a bit cheaper. But I think the cheaper piece, everybody gets all hung up on the cheaper piece, but it's a £100 billion marketplace. And as an example, the entire joint venture revenue is £150 million. So even if we cut it in half, which we probably won't be able to initially, it's to the right of the decimal point. So I don't think we should be thinking about this solely from a cost standpoint because I think there's other benefits. So we'll go to the next slide just to give you a sense of what is the tech that's actually being built, because you may have seen some of this in either the press or some of the PR that we send out from time to time. So the tech to build this new cloud-based platform is being delivered in 5 sequences, and they build one upon the other, which you might expect. So we started with the simple and are going towards the more complex. So we call these things sequences. Sequence 1 and 2 has been delivered. Sequence 1 is things like, what cloud service are you going to use? You're going to use Google Cloud, AWS, something else. What kind of security are you going to use to make sure that people don't see data they shouldn't see, cyber protection, those kind of things. Sequence 2 was the ability to process business, singleton business, globally, with global currency capabilities. Sequences 3 and 4 are the ones that are specific to Lloyd's. So it's premium and claims for open market, it's premium and claims for delegated authority, and then sequence 5, which I mentioned a moment ago, is this thing that we call the digital gateway, which is simply, I don't know why we come up with this term, but it's simply a way for a market participant to send something to us in electronic format instead of paper format, and then hopefully, because you have data standards, a lot less manual intervention in between this. Sequence 1 and 2 has been delivered. Sequences 3 and 4 will be done by the end of March next year. From a technical standpoint, I'll come back to the delivery dates in a moment. And then sequence 5 will technically be built by the end of June. The reason you see those dates up there is that the June 24 date for sequences 3 and 4 and the September 24 date for sequence 5. So once you get through sequence 4, we will have built the new tech platform that will process premium and claims, this cloud-based tech platform. We have to then turn it on inside the London market joint venture. Has no implication to the marketplace. However, you need to, or some of you will need to connect to that new platform if you're connected to the old platform. So there are things like today you send messages to one URL, tomorrow you have to send messages to a new URL. So that data is quite important because we do need the marketplace to be ready to make that cutover, which is the term we're using, because running this marketplace on 2 platforms is hugely problematic. So that's why we've sort of chunked that data. The September date for the gateway is not a market cutover. So my guess is, and we were having this conversation before the meeting started, my guess is it'll take 2 or 3 years, hopefully no more than that, to get the market to fully adopt to utilizing the gateway. But the technology will be built, including the gateway, by June of next year. Testing of how the technology works and connects with the marketplace will start in earnest in January. With the cutover date, we say June here, it's actually going to be 7/1 is the actual cutover date, and the gateway going live in September. So we can come back to that if we want. So the next slide, this just gives you a bit more explanation of what we call phase 1 and phase 2 adoption. Phase 1 is this market cutover. So we need the entire market to be ready to cut over, which is now scaring the bejesus out of people because they're going, holy moly, I don't know if we have enough time. And so we're working through that. It's probably going to be the bane of my existence until July 1st, one way or the other. I may have to pump prescription drugs in order to manage my own stress level. But we have to do this, otherwise we're going to have because it's not this, as you know, and particularly in open market, it's not single to business. We got syndicates writing different pieces of the risk, and so putting it on 2 platforms is a problem. Phase 2 is the gateway. Phase 2 will be available in September, but there's a much more adaptable, if you will, adoption curve to that. So the next slide, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this just gives you a sense of what the timeline looks like, and it kind of talks about those key dates. If you ask me what's going to go wrong, hopefully I live long enough to see it go right. I don't think it's going to be the tech. I think the tech's actually going to be built now, in which there was a big question about that probably a year ago. It won't be the data standards; those have been agreed for open market. It probably won't be the gateway. That'll work. I think the 2 or 3 places it could go wrong is the vendors aren't ready to connect to the new platform. That would be a problem. The vendors don't do the things they need to do to get ready to send business to the gateway. That'll be a problem, although it's not quite as time sensitive. Or my experience, my brief experience in the lending market is everybody wants to add scope to these programs. Scope creep kills these things. Or when you get into things like testing, there'll always be somebody who says, oh no, we need to test something else. We need to test more. And at some point, we're going to have to sort of say, enough's enough, we got to flip this thing over, or it won't happen. I'm not actually worried too much about, I'm worried about it, but the market being ready, because the changes are relatively manageable and they've now been published. We just now need to do a bit of shoe leather to make sure that we haven't missed somebody and they can't connect in July. And we probably will have some laggards like this would be that cannot connect in July. And so the question is, what are the implications for those folks, which is important for us to say, because if I came to you and said, if you can't connect, you cannot trade, that would probably be a problem. If I said to you, you can't connect, you weren't going to be able to get this download, you have to deal with the data differently, that might be less of a problem. So we need to better articulate that for the market, which I don't think we've done a very good job of so far. So the next slide, I won't go through all this, but because it sounds like this is a Bob James positive performance appraisal, so please give me a rise in pay. It's not meant to be that way. It's just to say there actually has been a lot of stuff that has been done, and probably the ones I would call out that are the most important was the establishment of this core data record for open market and getting it turned into the court standards. That's really sounds mundane, but it's quite fundamental. The other thing is now taking what we've done for open market and getting an agreed data standard for delegated authority business. What we're trying to do is harmonize those 2 data standards. So there's not one for coverable business and one for open market business. We think that work will be done in March of next year. Getting court to then turn into court standards. Assuming there's not a lot of change, there shouldn't be that much work because they've already done it for open market. And the last thing I would say is this faster claim payment solution. We've gotten some moaning might be the right word. Some pushback about how it works with brokers and some of the cash issues and your vendor system and not supporting it, which I get, and we need to make sure we iron those things out. But it's probably the one thing that the people that are using it has made a big difference to the cover or not having to manage a bunch of loss funds with the delegated claim authority to savings for the syndicates. But probably most importantly for the customers, particularly back claims, where a huge volume comes through and all of a sudden a loss fund goes into a deficit position. That all goes away with basket fund payments. So the next slide. I think I talked about what's coming next, but for those of you who do open market business, testing will be available in January in earnest for the entire market. This Vanguard group you see up there is a group of 32 market participants consisting of brokers and underwriters that are getting a lot of emphasis to make sure that the platform's ready. And then, as I said in an earlier slide, phase one, which is this market cutover, it says June here because we were trying to be a bit vague at the time. It's actually going to be July 1st. And then the gateway, which is phase two, is in September. Next slide. So what if it works? What's happened? It means that we've done all the testing and the platform works, which I'm less worried about. The market's ready from an organizational standpoint that they've done their own testing and they've done their new connection points versus the old connection points. And then the third one is that we've gotten both the market and importantly the regulator comfortable that when we flip the switch, the lights are not going to go out and not come back on again. Now, I said that on purpose that way because it's not really that way. Because I get all sorts of like, oh, well, someone said the other day, which is wouldn't leave it alone. Someone unfortunately touched my face though. What if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? And I said, well, if it doesn't work, there's three things are going to happen. You'll sack me. Well, I'm not. It doesn't matter what order it's in. And I'll have to go work somewhere else. Hopefully, we will have spent a lot of money, and that'll be a problem. But we'll still trade. We'll still be trading on this stupid 35-year-old platform. So it's not like the market's going to go out of business. But a successful change would be that when we turn the new platform on, because we will not turn the old platform off, is that it actually works and the market's ready. And if we can get to that point in time, it's not everything I think everybody in the market wants, but it's a big leap forward and it builds a foundation for the future. Next slide. So this is the piece that probably will cause a lot of conversation. I think we've underattended to delegated authority business as it relates to Blueprint 2. Part of it, and this is, by the way, I should have started this conversation with the caveat. The views expressed herein are not necessarily those of Lloyd's, its management, its board of directors, or its members. It's just my personal point of view. But I think some of the stuff that we inherited in Blueprint 2 is a carryover from LM Tom. Things like this famous decom system that has been the bane of a lot of people's existence. And we spent a lot of money on it. And some of it is to the point I was making earlier, which is I don't think we have a very joined up view of if we build something, and for example, if we were to say, because I get a lot of pressure like, well, why don't we have APIs to send the data in? Well, part of the reason we don't is because we're trying to harmonize the data standards. It makes no sense to create an API into the gateway under the current data standards and then turn around 4 months later and change it. But even if we had an API, I think there's some people have this aspirational risk that we're going to get rid of bordereaux. I'm not sure that's going to happen. So what we are trying to do with both REBA and with you guys and with the LMA is to say what is a workable set of changes that we could actually do. Because it's generally, in my experience, not just in the London market, but generally, it's generally not about money. You can always sort of find money, and there's a lot of money sloshed around the place. It's really, if you had the money to spend it, could you actually build it? Because some of the stuff that some people want to build is a bit aspirational and maybe really hard to build. And then if you built it, can you actually get people to use it? And in a marketplace like the London marketplace, and I'll admit I come from a U.S. cover holder background, but I was a broker, and I was an underwriter. If an underwriter came and said to me, "Oh, you got to do the following 15 things, or we're not going to take your business anymore," I just look at my combined ratio and I say, "Well, I've got an 85% combined ratio, and it seems to be growing quite great. No problem. I'll just go down and talk to John." So we got to sort of figure out what's that threading the needle of what's doable and what's executable in terms of market adoption. So you will get some functionality, both the underwriters and cover holders, out of the delegated authority piece, but it is not the functionality that people want. But it does not have an API to send in data electronically for the reasons I mentioned earlier. And we still have way too many legacy systems that sit out in the marketplace, both from an underwriting and a broker standpoint, that we probably need to rationalize. And I'll sort of leave it at that and take it in the Q&A. I think that's the prepared remarks as such as they are. And I'm happy to take questions or comments or anything else from that matter. Thank you.
Okay, anyone, I'll alternate. So if anyone has any questions in the room, please go ahead and ask them now. Now's your opportunity, and then I'll check online. So for those online, if you want to type in your questions using the chat facility, do so now. But first of all, anyone in the room?
I'll pick up on my book. So you sort of referenced that maybe stakeholder engagement for VA businesses, although it's after open market, I can do it best. What I suppose my question is, what can we do as the NGA, but importantly ensure that stakeholder engagement across the whole piece, the cover holders, their proprietary software houses, where it has an impact in terms of these changes? What would be your counsel in terms of ensuring that is as best as it possibly can be? I think what I would say, and I think I'm glad you raised it, has been a level of frustration that, cover holders have been left in the dark. Fortunately, we as association managed to capture our members for private software houses, right? So that they've got LinkedIn, and there were some who actually support cover holders who weren't even aware of what's going on. So we managed to close that off. So I'd be really interested in terms of what reassurance or what actions we should do to actually ensure that stakeholder engagement is so best as it possibly can be.
The short answer is I don't know. Because I think it is and I hate giving trite answers because they're trite. I think it would be helpful to have a conversation with all the associations in the room, whoever you want from your association, because there's so many different ideas about what it should or shouldn't be, and I won't personalize it, but someone was giving me the business last week about why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? I said, okay, well, I said, what if I did it? And I had a directional. I said, what if it cost £10 million to do what you want to do? Who do you want to pay for it? Quiet. And I said, so if Lloyd's paying for it, will you guarantee me your bonus that you'll get? This was a syndicate, and maybe you'll get 50% of your distributors to use it. Will you guarantee that? I said, with all due respect, I said, I come from the other side of the marketplace. I've not like a 20-year Lloyd's employee. If we can't answer those questions, I don't know how we move things forward, because we'll either not be able to build a technical solution because we don't have the money, or we're able to build a solution, but it won't work because we can't get this ecosystem to move in concert with one another. And I think maybe this is already happening and I'm just not aware of it. But when I go to the LMA, I hear certain issues. When I talk to the IUA, I hear certain issues. And they obviously have their own point of view as risk takers. LEVA has a different set of issues. You guys probably have, and those are probably more aligned. But I do think we need to have a more joined up approach, because my experience, well, first of all, it's 50%, give or take, I think it's maybe 40-some% of the Lloyd's book. So it's like, it's not a rounding error for Lloyd's itself. And probably if you look at the London marketplace, the percentage of business might be similar to that. So it's a lot of business. If it's the entire London market, it's 40 or 50 billion pounds of business. So it's not a rounding error. Secondly, as an underwriter, I liked cover holder business because it allowed me to grow in ways I couldn't grow on my own. Because it didn't have the underwriting expertise. It didn't have the access to distribution that cover holders had. So if I had a credible cover holder, it was a way for me to extend my underwriting capability in ways I couldn't do it myself. And as a cover holder, I guess was hopefully not too many underwriters in there. I was amazed at how naive the capacity was. Like I would go tell people wanting to do something, I think, there's no way in hell that I would say yes to this. And depending by the market setting, they'd say yes. So there's a huge growth opportunity. And I think at least the last set of stats I looked at, probably 2 years ago, not to be fair, showed that cover holder business had outgrown directly written business for underwriters, at least in the US, for quite a period of time throughout the cycles for all the reasons we just said. But I think that the question that probably needs to happen, and it probably starts with the associations with Lloyd maybe sitting at the table listing versus telling, is how do you get the market to move in concert, and what are the 2 or 3 things that are most important? Because it's like, and I'm not picking on anybody, but someone said earlier, well, we're going to use artificial intelligence, which probably actually would work if you put enough effort in it, to get the AI to write the cover holder agreement between the syndicate and the cover holder. Well, that's interesting, but if I'm a cover holder, I don't care who writes the damn contract, frankly. If you give it to me, I don't like it, I'm going to want to change it. So there's still that back and forth, but I think that's the problem. And I don't know how to solve it, because I think when you put people in a room, you have to then find a way to go from the 25 ideas that get thrown on the table to the ones that 3 or 4 that people agree with, and start taking it off in chunks. And maybe that's happened before, and because I'm new to the market, I just not as familiar with it, but I don't know how else you get at it.
Okay, so but you would, if I led on that and tried to get the association, you'd have the endorsed that's not.
And I'm so excited. I'm not trying to pick on my employer because they do employ me. But I think it's also important that we don't have to be a Lloyd's-led initiative, because there's just all sorts of suspicion, history of Lloyd's not doing what they said they were going to do, and being condescending, and a lot of things about the Lloyd's brand that I hear about that is because I haven't been in there a long time. I've been surprised, but probably is true. But I think if it was a market-led initiative, and it was done around the fact that, and I think these facts are true, that the MGA, which is the term I use in the States, marketplace has outgrown the direct underwritten marketplace over a long period of time. The innovation that comes from cover holders is better than comes from big companies, because big companies just can't innovate their way out of getting their lunch sometimes. And the fact that it's probably 40 or 50% of the marketplace. I don't know how much of the company market it is, but it is of the Lloyd's marketplace, that there's a burning platform to want to do something. And the hard market's not going to last forever. So if we could find a way to navigate a growth curve through a softer market with cover holder business, I think there's a reason for people sit at the table and figure out what's doable and what's most important. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. We do have a question online, just for the people in the room. If you are going to ask a question, if you can speak as loudly as possible, just so the recording can pick it up, that would be great. So a question from Nick Marley. Thanks, Nick. Do cover holders get an opportunity to input on CDR? As far as we're aware, open market and reinsurance have already had an opportunity, and comments have been made that following their review, CDR is now set.
Yes, so we will. First thing, I think the good news is that this is directionally correct. It's probably not 100% correct. I think 80 to 90% of the standards are pretty much the same. Sometimes it's used different naming convention, but the actual underlying data is the same, whether it's open market or cover holder business. But when we get the standards harmonized, we won't send them to a court unless we've gone through a consultation process with the marketplace. And in this case, because it's cover holder data standards, the consultation process will be with cover holders and underwriters, just like we did on open market.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, so I'll go to the room next again. So questions in the room, please, for Bob.
I'm wondering about user stories and a user story for a cover holder that only works with Lloyd's, the user story for a cover holder which works with Lloyd's and company markets, a cover holder who's also their own in-house broker, and how all of this change is going to be reflected in practice. So as far, I'm not aware of any user stories, and I might be behind the 8 board here, but do we have user stories? Because it's always very interesting listening to the theory of how it's going to pass out, but for each person to then actually understand the impact on their business and what they have to do to get to that position, I've always found that user story is absolutely critical. So I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes, there are user stories. They're sitting out on the new Delegated website. I think the tab is still Blueprint 2, but it's got like more adoption information now than it had 6 months ago. In some cases it's been overloaded, but there's a lot of stuff there. But I think it would be fair if you looked at those user stories, you thought they were too open market focused, to give us some feedback on that. Because as I mentioned earlier, a lot of this work has been around how do we get data standards in place for open market. So, but they are out there. I just couldn't tell you how much of that delineation between open market and cover holder user stories there is, or whether it's an appropriate mix, or we need to do more on the like delegated authority side.
Maybe that's something that the MGAA can work with as well, because as a group, you know, there'll be common ways in which we behave.
But there because I've looked at it, there are, like, for example, there's quite a few user stories on claims as an example. But to be fair to your point, I think it's more open market focused, and because as you know, like the user story for claims and the cover holder space is a bit more complex because you have more people involved in the process.
Okay.
Thank you. And if you've got any questions for those of you online, type them in now. And I'll just throw it open to those in the room again. So any questions?
When we get on your list for data records, how will we make sure that we're doing some of this?
So when we get ready to do the market consolidation, market consultation, it'll go through the LNG sponsored data council out to this group here as to who should be involved in that consultation process. Because what this is sort of normal. What we found is you can offer it to everybody, and certain people have a huge amount of interest, and other people just have no interest, or they just want to know what's going on. And so we have to figure out who the people that really want to input into it, because we got a lot of input. It took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take to get through the consultation process, not because people weren't interested, it's because people were, and if you're actually going to take their input into account, you got to sort through that. But we will definitely be doing that. It'll be in the first quarter of next year.
Other questions in the room? We're still at 15 minutes.
So just trying to understand, so the core data record at the moment has been set, and then the pathway into effectively replacing DA stats, which is obviously collapsed or failed, that's all going to be set in the next quarter and the first quarter of next year, and then it goes live in June next year.
Well, what'll go live in June next year is the existing data standards. It won't be the new whatever.
V5.2.
Yes, it won't be
data.
Yes, it won't be the new data standards. What I don't know, and I'm sorry I don't know it, is if we were to agree a harmonized data standards between open market and cover holders, which is the goal. What does it then take a court to do in order to make sure that it's now also in a court standard? Because we're trying to not have two sets of data standards out there, some accord, some non-accord, so that all the messaging and stuff is accord based. And Mike, if you ask me if you say, well, you can't leave the room until you tell me, I think it's realistic that to get an accord set of data standards for cover holder business that is harmonized with open market is probably a third quarter 2024 type time frame to take, because it took 6 months for a court to turn the open market.
So other than the system we use, actually day to day, there's going to be no difference to our lives really for at least the next year, before we even then start to implement vendors or anything like that.
That's right.
So it's a 2025 project really.
Yeah, and even if we were sitting here today and we had the standards, here they are, which we don't. Then we got to do, in my view, we have to be realistic about, well, what's the adoption curve on that?
It's just difficult for us because we obviously see a lot of publicity about Blueprint 2 and the core data record being championed, but really, you know, for my business, it's kind of almost irrelevant for 12, 18 months.
That's right, which is why I said we've got more work to do on the VA side. Completely fair comment.
It's just trying to understand, because it is difficult for us to understand a lot of the time when we see a lot of good publicity coming on as to what it actually means for us and when some of these deadlines are going to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Bob on that, and again, listen to a couple of questions, but I think, and we'll take it offline, but I think as the MGAA, it's really important that we understand and then we are sharing our members exactly that pathway and stakeholders in that, in the CBR, in the user story, and even on a Janet and John basis, because my concern has been, and maybe that much, is that there's been conversations, headline conversations around DA business, and we've not been at that table. And I've asked to be at that table. I was asked actually, I wanted to be on the, which I think was chaired by Sheila, I wanted to be on the open market data standards piece. I just said, well, it's not DA, so you don't need to be on it. But clearly, hindsight's a great thing. 85% of that has been agreed. And now the output of that is, can we harmonise that on colour holder stuff? And it was felt that we shouldn't have been at that table. Now, that's not on you at all. I'm just being open and honest. The fact that people say, well, we don't want the MGA there because it's got nothing to do with the agencies. But clearly, as you quite rightly said and articulated in your presentation, 85% of the CDR is felt, can we harmonise it with colour holder? And if I'd been at that table on behalf of our members, I could have actually shared our members' views and said, well, actually, our members don't think it's quite 85%. It could be 85%.
Well, that'd be great.
It could, exactly. And you know, we don't know. But that's for us to get on, but that's where
I don't disagree with anything you said. I completely agree, and I'm not passing judgment on why or why not you weren't at that table. I do think it's also important to remember that the CDR is not it's not all the data that is used in the marketplace. It's the data that's used to move money, move premium and claims information, so that premium claims can be orchestrated in the marketplace. So one of the pressure points that we've gotten as well should include also the risking potential. We try to stay away from that because you then get a data standard that's huge, and you can, in my personal opinion, you'll never get agreement from all the underwriters as to what the risk information should be, which has been a bone of contention between Lloyd and the LMA. But what we said is if we just start with having a common set of agreed data to just move premium claims, which is why it might very well be that the harmonization isn't as much as we might think it is, because it's not some of the more esoteric stuff that seems to be done by a cover over on a pre-bind basis or by an underwriter. It's just when you're ready to bind that business, can we move the dollars and the claims around the marketplace? But your points will take them.
And we have another question online, so thanks, James Calvert. Within the self-service testing window in 2024, is there going to be an opportunity for carriers and brokers to collaborate on test scenarios? For, say, a claim scenario, a broker can direct an FNOL to a specific carrier, and that carrier can respond through the new ICOS functionality, replacement of ECF2.
So the answer to that is yes. It'll be more formal with the Vanguard participants because they've already agreed on a set of work that they're going to do, and I think the number of Vanguard participants is now 32. We're probably not going to be able to go much beyond 40 because we'll run out of capacity. But when the testing platform is opened up for the marketplace, anybody can do any testing they want, either by themselves or with another party, to make sure that the messaging works. That's part of the reason for opening it up. So it's not some black box where people haven't had a chance to play with it and they're relying on other people to attest that it works or doesn't work.
Thanks, Bob. Still got about 10 minutes, so certainly time for a couple of questions. So other questions in the room?
So you only get 2 more questions over there.
But the, on previous presentation we got from yourself, but in our general Lloyd's update, we've looked to try and get under the skin around when we get this utopia, you know, what's the savings? So there's a lot of money being spent. But what about that? Is there any view on the ground of how Lloyd's will be more competitive in business wins? And if you thought I was going to ask this, because that seems a grey area in terms of, you know, makes Lloyd's a more attractive marketplace. The expense allocation is lower because of now digital. So you know where I'm going.
Yeah, no, it's a great it's a great question. So I get constantly beat up, particularly by the LMA on this issue. Sometimes by me, but most of the LMA. Oh, you spent all this money on Blueprint 2. I said, well, first I said, let's put all this money, because it is a lot of money. It's like we could all retire on it. But let's put it in the context of £100 billion marketplace. And the money that's been spent has been over a 5-year period of time, particularly if you go back to Ellen and Tom. So we looked at 5 years of spend from 2020 and then prospectively to 2025. What do we think was going to cost to deliver this, including, for example, how much is PPL going to have to spend to make their platform digital ready? How much is it costing the joint venture through DXC to modernize the platform, all that kind of stuff? The issue is, and this is my personal opinion, the issue is all of the estimates around savings have been theoretical, top-down spreadsheet exercises because nothing's been built. So it's kind of like if I said to you, I can walk to Liverpool Street in 5 minutes, which is not true because I'm a slow walker. Until I actually try to walk to Liverpool Street, I don't actually know. And what we've done around cost savings estimates has been, well, we haven't walked to Liverpool Street, but we'll estimate how long it's going to take us to get there. And I just think the cold hard reality, get to the ultimate issue in this moment, is you got to actually have the tech working in the marketplace to see what happens. Because otherwise it's just numbers on the page with no practical reality. Now, not everybody agrees with me, including people that sign my payslip. But I think the more fundamental issue is, and I'm not saying this because I'm in a cover holder media, I'm saying this because it's true and I have been a cover holder. If I start saving a bunch of money because of some tech that was delivered, I'm not going to, in my first instance, ring up my underwriter and say, by the way, my expense ratio just went down 2.5 percentage points. I think you should cut my commissions. Because that's just the right thing to do because it'll help them. I'm not going to do that. So I just think it's a bit naive for people to assume that because savings show up in a particular part of the marketplace that they're going to immediately show up in the price of the product. It just doesn't work that way. Now, it may over a period of time cause there to be some downward pressure that commercially the marketplace starts to move in a particular direction. But I had this, still remember I was in a meeting one day with a carrier when I was in the US, and we had about a $400 million book of work comp business. And, you know, sitting there, I was sitting here, we had our own actuaries. I had an actuary opinion on this. And the first words out of that person's mouth was, we're paying you too much commission. I said, I'm glad you brought that up. I said, because actually you're not paying us enough. Because I'm running an 85% ultimate combined ratio on this book of business, have been for a long period of time. I'm happy not to market it, but you're going to have to give me more profit sharing commission. They didn't like the conversation. I didn't get the percent I want, but I got 1.5% I wanted. So I think this whole issue around market savings has to be put in the context of the commercial realities of all the different people in the food chain. And I think ultimately, if you make the cost of the product cheaper, it'll probably at some point turn into the price of the product the customer pays. I just think that's a very complex thing to navigate, and it's not that the money just drops through the books. And the last thing I'll say is, again, it's a £100 billion marketplace, and I'm not sure that the biggest cost mover in terms of value is the expense ratio including acquisition cost. You know, I had books of business where I got paid 25 points of commission because they were really profitable, or I brought real expertise that others in the US didn't bring. And it's like, if you don't want to pay it, Mr. Underwriter, Miss Underwriter, I'll just go to some other underwriter. And so that's why I don't think there's an easy answer to it. Thank you.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question in the room before we have to finish, because we've got a hard stop and the room is booked at 11 o'clock. So one last question for anyone. Now's the time. No, okay, let's wrap it up then. So thanks very much, Bob, for your time today. Much appreciated, and for coming in, and for everyone else for coming in as well. It's great to see you all. Thanks everyone for joining online. Yeah.
Bob, we'd probably like to invite you back.
Happy to come back.
Maybe sort of the first quarter next year, and we'll get those slides up and then we'll stay. This is what you told him in October. We're now in March, but again, thank you very much for doing it.
Thanks, Bob. Look forward to that. And yeah, we'll send out the link to the recording and the slides. So don't forget to provide your feedback when you receive those. Hope you all have a productive day, both in the room and out. And thanks again for joining us, and see you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam.